this. About an hour and a half to go before Finance Minister Arun Jaitley stands up to present what will be his fourth actual budget. And the last big one or main one before this government heads into general elections in 2019, which is next year. And that makes this a fairly critical budget, though budgets always are critical and they're always a tightrope walk. Today we're going to discuss over the next half hour with Ira, Niraj, but more importantly Raghav Bahl, what this budget should contain. Which is the main constituency the finance minister will be talking to? Will it be consumers, taxpayers, industry, or voters? Raghav, what are you watching for in this budget speech?
Well, consumers, voters, savers, investors, it's the same bunch of guys, right? So it comes down to emphasis. Who will he emphasize on? Listen, I think while it's nice to talk about budgets and their impact, the fact of the matter is, if you take away most of the talk in the budget, there are really two things or two areas where the budget really ends up impacting, right? One is the money markets. Clear, straight impact, government's borrowing program, bond prices, interest rates. So that's a clear, straight impact. The other is direct taxes now, right? Whatever is the model of direct taxes he comes up with, and that clearly straight away affects investment and consumption. Other than that, with indirect taxes now out into the GST Council, really a lot of the other stuff is talk. I mean, if the finance minister of a $2 trillion economy is going to spend 5 lines talking about a 10 crore rupee allocation to some scheme, then you know that it's a lot of air in there. The impact is really in these two areas. And honestly, while all of us are completely exercised about the budget, I think there's a very big story unfolding in the by-elections. There are 5 by-election results that are being announced today. And the last I saw, of course, it's early. It's the second round of counting happening. Never before, and if for all of you who want
Don't
to
understand politics.
No, who want to get a little bit more political insight into what's happening. Since the 1980s, for the last 35 years, mark this, for the last 35 years in Rajasthan, no sitting government has lost a Lok Sabha by-election. Never. Whether Congress or BJP. Today, the BJP is trailing in both. So, there is a bigger story which is unfolding here. And I know it's sort of, rural distress. We talk about it in sort of shorthand and say rural distress. The fact of the matter is, that we get too obsessed with what's happening in stock markets and with the economy in the corporate sector. And that's what budgets are for. But I think, there is a bigger story unfolding today in the wake of Gujarat.
So that prompts a couple of questions, I'm sure. One is, do you then think that it's perfectly kosher for the finance minister to breach the fiscal deficit targets, to be able to spend more to alleviate the stress in rural India, because that's not just the economic need of the hour, but also the political need of the hour for the government, thanks to what we've seen happen in the Gujarat elections, thanks to what you're talking about in the by-elections, and the fact that this year will throw up 8 state elections. So that's number one. Or number two, should his spending priority then not be rural India, but be, some sort of corporate tax rate cut or something like that? Where do you stand in this debate? Because we have over the last few days made it very clear where any of us stands in this debate. So.
No, implicit in your question, Menaka, is the assumption that 40,000 crore rupees of extra allocation in rural schemes changes political fortunes. It never does.
Okay.
It simply has never done. If you look at the political history of this country, what does 30,000 crore, 40,000 crore extra do in terms of a few hand pumps or a few, few small subs? So really, any narrative which says that today I'm going to be able to change my political fortunes by throwing 40,000 crores is not going to work. So coming now to the most substantial part of your question, which is fiscal deficit. Should he breach it? I believe a 0.3% breach is no big deal. It's not so much the issue of the fiscal deficit breach, it's the quality of the fiscal deficit. Will he, for instance, breach the fiscal deficit by putting more money in the hands of consumers? Yes, I would say go ahead and do it, but they're not going to do that. You probably will have...
Wow, but that's a double whammy. You breach the fiscal deficit by putting more money in the hands of consumers, which is in itself also inflationary. So what are you setting the economy up for then, at a time when crude prices are already going up? You've got macro stability to watch out for.
if you are going to give a stimulus to the economy, then the worst kind of stimulus is extra public expenditure. Then the better stimulus is greater private expenditure by tax cuts.
Which is then income tax cuts. Personal slab income tax cuts.
Listen, if you were to ask me what has been the biggest fiscal failing of this government in the last 4 years, according to me, it's the energy pricing policy that it's followed. There was a 3 percentage point GDP stimulus in oil prices.
Which is lost now.
Which has been lost because of this whole talk of higher public expenditure. If that stimulus had actually stayed with the consumers, or alternately, I had suggested this in one of my writings, that alternately, if this entire thing had been used to recapitalize banks, if the extra revenue that you got from petrol excise was used not to, sorry, sounding awful about it, that to put a few more hand pumps, that doesn't do anything. That doesn't alleviate anything.
This is the classic debate between who spends better, government or individuals.
Is it a debate? Yeah. Menaka, is it a debate?
In economics, it's a debate. But in economics, everything is a debate, right?
It's in Paul Samuelson's #1 textbook. But
I say debate because often governments feel they are more efficient in spending or they are better. Governments feel that, and I think the private sector always feels it's better, left to consumers to spend, or businesses to spend.
I think government public expenditure all over the world has never proven to be efficient. I mean, look at any capital multiplier of public expenditure. It doesn't work. We all know that.
Yeah.
Bulk of it goes into establishment costs and this, that, and the other. So if we are talking about increasing the fiscal deficit, I think that, to me, that's not a big deal. I know bond prices...
I have a question.
Yes,
after you finish.
But
Raghav, you have covered the budget for so many years. If we don't want to do it 3%, why does committee after committee after committee keep saying 3%? Don't say it.
Can I second that, please?
I totally agree with you.
Yeah. 3 committees now.
No, listen. Your question was if there has to be a breach. If you were to ask me, I don't think we should be breaching.
We should not.
We should not.
Out of credibility or out of actuals? Like the government, the market can't support the government borrowing.
Yes, exactly. Out of economics. Yeah. Out of economics. I mean, once a pretty flamboyant Reserve Bank of India governor, deputy governor actually, told me that I asked him कि interest rate क्यों नहीं नीचे आता इस economy में. He says, listen, there is an elephant in the vegetable market, which is chomping it all out. He says, how will vegetable prices come down? So how will interest rates come down?
That's true.
The government borrowing is so overwhelming.
Yeah.
And if you look back in history, when we had our biggest economic surge, when was it? 2003, 4? 2003. What was the situation then? You had a current account surplus. You had 5% was AAA and government yields 5.5 or something.
Jalan.
Yes,
Jalan years.
And just one thing, as finance minister, there was a massive tax cut, which put more money in the hands of consumers. I'm not saying anything great or new. This is the way economies.
So if there was so you're saying he should be fiscally prudent. He should stick to the fiscal targets.
Yes.
He should not be tempted to spend more in public expenditure. Should he be tempted to give away more in terms of an income tax rate cut?
Absolutely.
Yeah, but he did just last year. He raised the slab.
You see, that's what I'm saying.
Last year or year before last?
It's the quality of the deficit. Why can't we give more? If you want the housing sector to be the big growth determinant of the economy, well, give much more aggressive mortgage tax deductions. Make big things there rather than talk about I'm going to put 100 more crores in smart cities. No one's seen those smart cities yet. I'm going to put 100 crores more in this. I'm going to put 100 crores. That's my problem with the whole aspect of budget making. And now it's the 4th budget of the government. Honestly, it's good for us. We'll spend a whole day talking about it. but it's going to do very little, except for those 2 areas that I told you. One is the architecture of direct taxes, if they are bold enough to make big changes, and the other is money markets. Money markets, of course, are on tenterhooks. I mean,
they really are.
7.5% is your
new tenure.
Is your tenure. 100 basis points movement in about 2 months.
Yeah, the bond route has been, I think Bloomberg News had put out a story, it's the worst since 2000. It's just...
So there you are. So and markets always give you absolutely correct messaging, right? That you are messing up the balance of the economy by having a state sector which is preponderant.
But it's a state, I suppose it's, sorry, Niraj, go ahead, because we can argue this forever. If the state didn't spend and the private sector wasn't spending, then who would be spending, and then how would...
where pull up that rural versus urban that you identify.
I think, you didn't give it a chance, right?
The private sector is genuinely, sort of bogged down by 1,000 balance sheet issues, Raghav.
Well, so we talk about the twin. That's what I'm saying. If you ask me what is the biggest policy missed by this government is it wasted the energy bonanza in trying to pump prime the economy. If it had used that 3 lakh, 4 lakh crores that it got in actually, say, recapitalizing banks, your twin balance sheet problem goes out. One balance sheet problem goes away. If it had actually used that to cut taxes in the hands of consumers, your consumption expenditure would have been. But instead, if you're going to feel happy by pump priming the economy and showing a GDP growth rate, 55% of that growth coming from public expenditure.
You should have done that recap in 2015. And I think Arvind Subramaniam acknowledged that, right? He said that, we didn't pay enough attention to this. They should have done it in 2015.
Yeah, but which is why now the question, Raghav, is what now? I mean, we can argue about what should have been done and was not done. The question is what now? And if the belief is, or if we all believe that he shouldn't go down the path of going away from the fiscal prudence that he's shown, and the assumption is that the tax revenues will probably grow about 15%. I think brokerages are varying out there between 15 to 20%. How does he try to kickstart the animal spirits if he doesn't breach the fiscal deficit by ever a whisker?
You will never be able to kickstart any animal spirit by pump priming the economy and by putting public expenditure.
So leave
out.
It in the hands of the consumer.
You have to, the multiplier of consumption expenditure is much, much more.
Sure.
The multiplier of private investment is much, much more. You've got an interest rate in the economy which is very high. And if you're going to, if you're not going to, if the government borrowing program continues the way it is, the interest rates are not coming down, as we've seen in the bond market. So, listen, the bus has been missed. Now we are talking about the last 5 kilometers of the journey. I don't think anything should be changed now. It's futile.
What if this budget, we were doing this in the edit meeting yesterday. We were throwing out of the box ideas saying how would we react or what should we do in terms of reportage or coverage if he announces a universal basic income scheme.
And I'll add to that, there's some completely sort of, buzz doing the rounds on some universal healthcare kind of program.
Yeah.
But honestly, announcements, are we going to give credence to announcements? As I wrote in my last column, Startup India Fund 10,000 crores, spent 90 crores.
That was, but that was flawed. As a concept, it was flawed. Any government that believes that it can energize a startup sector is a government that is really not thinking, right?
But it couldn't even spend on a flawed scheme. Its capacity to spend.
It cannot, because how can you find within government the capacity to do venture funding at a scale at which private sector is not able to do venture funding?
Absolutely.
Where is the ability to assess risk or anything like that?
So I'm saying if there are announcements, scheme after scheme, defense outlays, see how much we haven't yet got the 36 Rafale aircraft. The acquisition was announced 3 years ago. So the capacity of the state to spend productively, you don't need me to tell you.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying that announcements in the budget, I have seen budgets now for 30 years. Announcements in the budget on allocations and outlays, I've stopped looking at them. Unless honestly, there are big political game changers like a countrywide loan waiver for farmers. Now that the state will spend that money because that allocation will be met.
Are you suggesting this, or
I am not.
You're not suggesting.
No, I'm not suggesting it. I'm just trying to say that I don't.
Because I think Niraj was about to clutch at his heart.
I was about to say.
Nifty nosedive.
No, but the universal basic income would be an announcement of that nature.
It'll be an announcement, right? They'll say we'll do it in 2 experimental districts.
That's exactly what we were discussing yesterday.
It's impossible.
Look, it's not possible for them to roll it out in one go in 1 year, right? This is too complex a scheme. So what if they start by saying we'll do it in Karnataka?
Yeah, fair enough. But elections are 3 months out. What difference will you make? You probably give 200 rupees.
It's the promise, right? It's almost always the promise.
If you believe Indian voters vote on promise.
Of course they do. 2014 was a promise.
No.
Yes, it was a promise.
2014 was a huge reaction against a 2-year incumbent government which had lost its moorings. And the promise of change. But promise of change built on 2 years of anti-incumbency. Voters never, ever will vote on promises. They vote on the real situation on the ground. So when you get a promise of, say, we will have 50% more minimum support price, it's going to come back to bite you because you can't do that.
Yeah, but will he announce that? I think that's something we've discussed as well. MSP, higher MSPs.
I mean, it's not a budget
given
item,
what's happened last year.
No, but they won't do it. I think they've been very smart about MSPs. They understand it, they get it, and now you have an inflation target, so apart from everything else, you're just going to see rates rise.
But, Raghav, for all the pessimism you're expressing, sorry,
I'm not expressing any pessimism.
The economy is showing some signs of an upturn right now. Now, I don't know whether that is in spite of the government, despite of the government, because of the government, but is it not showing according to you sometimes? Because everything we're looking at seems to suggest green shoots.
Hold on, I'm not being pessimistic at all. I'm only saying you're overestimating the impact of 70% of air in the budget, which is a lot of talk. There are two areas which will have real impact: direct tax architecture and the borrowing program. That will have real impact. The rest I'm saying is talk. I'm not pessimistic at all. I just believe that the government frittered away the opportunity to use a mandate in the Lok Sabha which it had after 30 years. You see, look at the situation in which this government came. And we don't want to be talking alas only. Therefore, I expect that this budget will be a continuum of the other budgets. But look at what it came in with. Oil, a bonanza, 3 percentage point bonanza over 3 years of the GDP. Global economy, recovering. 6 years before that, it was in very bad shape. A mandate in the Lok Sabha, which therefore you could pass any kind of bill that you wanted. You could have structural changes in the economy. So it was a dream situation. I'll tell you, this government turned out to be a more effective UPA. It picked up Aadhaar and it said, fine, we'll make it more effective. It picked up
Narega as well.
Narega, absolutely.
Yeah. Record spends on Narega under this government.
Exactly. And the same with the Jan Dhan scheme. Again, the scheme was started by the UPA, just carried out more energetically. So to me, it was a continuum when there was an opportunity for a transformation. And now in the fourth year, you can't have transformations because that wonderful confluence of circumstances has evaporated. It's gone.
Oh, it's gone. Not just gone. It's rapidly reversing now.
It's rapidly reversing. So you're going to see a continuum today of the last 4 budgets, up, down, marginally, and therefore leaving out the money markets, where I think there is genuine concern. Everything else tomorrow morning will be business as usual. Honestly, for me, the by-election results would be a far more telling news story than the budget.
So can I say something tongue-in-cheek? No, Niraj, please finish. I keep interrupting you. No,
it's completely fine. I was just wondering, why is it that there is a belief that the juiced-up MSP or the a version of the Bhavantar scheme in Madhya Pradesh, which has been so popular, won't be rolled out on a
Has it been popular?
Basis? Yeah, apparently it has been.
Who's told you that?
Marketmen after marketmen who've gone and done the surveys.
Bhavantar scheme is a pilot scheme which has started. In concept, you are saying I will make it's a price equalization scheme. If you speak to some of the farmers in Madhya Pradesh, not the middlemen, the farmers, they are saying most of the gains have been cornered by the mandi, by the mandi artiya.
Okay, so the debate is not on Bhavantar, but a juiced-up MSP scheme. Why can't?
How?
Because he doesn't have the fiscal space for it, and the inflation problem. In fact, this government, one of the prudent things it did, but sometimes economic prudence has huge fallout, was being extremely conservative with the MSP.
Yeah.
In the first 3 years, it was extremely conservative with the MSP. It has faced the backlash of that.
Last year was the backlash.
Which is what I'm saying.
But the MSP scheme needed to be a part of a thought-through economic architecture of change. It can't be just one thing that you'll be conservative in, but on the others you won't be conservative.
And the reforms didn't play out, like the APMC reforms.
I was just going to add that thing. Unfortunately, and I understand this is a state subject as well, it's not just a central subject, but with so many states under BJP rule, they could have done a far better job of pushing through APMC reforms in a more effective manner. Because let's not forget, the UPA government had first announced this. If you remember, Dr. Singh announced it in the last 2 years of his term. And I don't think they managed to push through that, whereby farmers then get a much better price for their produce, and you're disintermediating the entire supply chain.
A crop insurance scheme. It's been announced, but you look at what has been done. Nothing on the ground. So the whole issue is that the transformational moment is gone. It'll be a continuum moment. Nothing wrong with it. I'm not pessimistic at all. I think the economy is turning. The global economy is turning. I think the slack in the economy is gone. Private consumption expenditure is going to come. The wealth effect will be tremendous. 5 to 6% of household savings now in equities, and they've pretty much gone up by 30%. So a lot of households are feeling very wealthy. So all of these things will play out. There's no question of it not playing out. I'm only saying that to expect today to be a break from the continuum, that won't happen.
What's the one thing you're definitely not going to be happy about if you see in the budget?
I don't know. If it's a bond borrowing program beyond what they've already said, because they've done their ups and downs. 50,000 crores one morning, Monday morning you tell, and then 6 days later you say, no, by the way, it's not 50,000, it's 20,000. Now if they come back and say, no, by the way, it is 50,000 crores. So it's that kind of inconsistency that one would be. Other than that, it's going to be a pretty standard continuing document, which will not disrupt too much. It should not disrupt too much. And I think, the curves are turning fine and we should be fine.
Okay, so the only thing I wanted to say tongue-in-cheek was that we make a big deal about how much of a big deal we make of budgets. But we're the ones who started making a big deal of budgets.
Right? The first place.
Meaning Raghav and you.
Hello? Excuse me, you were also on business television.
I came in a few years later. So it was Raghav.
You can't play the age card here.
It's an income-earning opportunity. Yeah. It's a noise-making opportunity.
Business television media that has really made budgets the big annual events that they've become.
Yeah. It's also the psyche of the country.
Thankfully now they're receding in terms of importance.
It's also the psyche of the country, right? In the 70s, 80s and 90s, government was such a dominant player in the economy that what the government said on this one day had a cascading impact downstream. Yeah. So therefore it was a big event. We made it into a bigger event.
Actually, I just found a beautiful way of blaming it all on you. You're the founder of business television in this country, aren't you?
Yes, which is why...
So it is entirely your fault that budgets are such big spectacles.
It's not a fault, it's great. We love it. It's a spectacle. One day everyone sort of dresses up in their best.
Oh, dear God. I don't know how many comments are hidden in that one comment. So we will quickly close this out. I think we've got, 30 seconds left on this debate. Any last thoughts on, what the day is going to bring forth, how investors, should be prepared, how consumers should react to this, anything like that? Or are you going to be watching the by-elections a lot more than the budget?
Right after I get off this, I'm going to be watching what the by-elections are doing. But, if some tax changes happen, as I said, more aggressive mortgage. For instance, if something like all mortgage payment will be tax deductible for a house up to 1 crore rupees. I would say now that will have a major impact. But if it's going to be an incremental change that no deductions will go up from 2 lakh to 4 lakh, then that's not good enough.
Yeah, to move.
But if you do discontinuous changes in kickstarting consumption, expenditure and investment, then I think I would be excited. But I'd be very surprised that will not happen, because then you would need 100 crores for this smart city, then you would need 100 crores for that universal basic income.
And there's no way to even track all of those spends, what the outcome of all of that is. Did it result in much? Did it not? Because none of those are transformational spends.
No, but and smart cities, you've seen what the numbers are 4 years out. It's some 10-15% has been allocated or spent or something like that.
Okay, sorry to interrupt, guys. FM on your screen, do you think he's given up the briefcase for an iPad yet?
Is he?
No.
I don't know. I'm just asking.
He hasn't. I think he's still carrying the red thing around.
By the way, Raghav, we hear that there is an outside chance that the budget speech may be in Hindi this time.
It's in bilingual, they are saying. It's going to be English and Hindi.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
that's what they're saying. So he will slip into Hindi.
We were anyways thankful that you were going to be joining us this afternoon, right after the speech. Raghav has a far better command over both languages than either one of us will.
No, Niraj, I heard him do a stand-up in Hindi just the other day.
So much of prepping for a 2 minute stand-up, so I'll pass that much.
Right. Well, we do want to remind our viewers that Raghav will be joining us right after the budget speech this afternoon, along with a stellar panel of economists, market experts, corporate experts, CFOs and tax experts. So make sure that you do tune in, not just for the speech starting 11 a.m., but for the first hour or two of analysis right after that, to get a comprehensive idea of whether the government has been able to effect any change in both consumption and investment in this economy through Budget 2018. With that, we're going to wrap it up here on this editorial huddle. Up next, we get back to markets with the F&O show. Stay tuned.